Hey guys, what's up? This is Jake with the Code Duck channel. Notice how I just said Code Duck this time. Actually, the name of the channel, not doing this, whatever that is, for the first two videos. Anyway, I'm here with another episode of 5 Things That the Movie Would Not Tell You. And this week we're talking about Alexander Dumas's The Count of Monte Cristo, a classic story of revenge and what can happen when you're both fabulously wealthy and extremely spiteful. The movie that we're going to reference in this particular episode, there have been a lot of adaptations of The Count of Monte Cristo over the years. There's a lot of movies that are actually by the same title, and then there's others that have the same theme, such as like V for Vendetta or other action movies that we know of. The idea of someone who is a normal person, they go into prison, they're put there for the wrong reason, they're betrayed to get in there, and then they come out something more. So it's kind of the acts of vengeance sort of thing. So the 5 things we're going to talk about, the particular adaptation we're going to relate to is the Jim Caviezel movie, the Jim Caviezel film that I think was 2004, I want to say. So it's fairly recent. There are other adaptations of the film where these may not apply, but this is the one we're going to talk about. Number 1, missing characters. So in the Jim Caviezel starring film, we are missing a ton of characters. We're missing Monsieur Notier, who instead is replaced with a Monsieur Clarion as Villefort's father. So he's not so much a missing character as one that's totally reworked. In the book, he's an invalid. He's quadriplegic. He can only communicate through blinks. We are also missing Valentine, who is Villefort's daughter. We are missing all of Albert's friends. We're missing the Major Cavalcanti. We're missing all sorts of people. Right off the top of my head, those are the ones I can think of. We're missing all sorts of folks. The reason for this, I know, is because that's a general theme we're going to be talking about in this. Is not that the book was better or the film was better. That particular adaptation of the movie, that particular movie, I absolutely love. I love that movie. It's a great story, and it's about as well as you can do it in the 2-hour allotment you have for a feature film. So it's not that it's better or worse. I think kind of Marvel recently has taught us that there can absolutely be an in-print version and there can be a cinematic version, right? So these aren't meant to be a comparison between the book and the film in that one's better and one isn't. I'm not one of those folks that says like the book was much better, although sometimes it is. We're talking about adaptations, so they may be the same title, but I don't think they ever set out to be the same thing. They just don't. The mediums of communication and telling a story are totally different. So again, bear in mind these are not the book is better. It's simply the differences between the two that you get when you have 1,200 pages like Dumas did and when you have 2 hours, which directors of films typically do. Number 1 is missing characters. We're missing a ton of characters right off the bat. And some of the characters that we do have are totally reworked. Number 2, Jacopo's place in the Count's life. So Jacopo in the book is really only mentioned in passing. He doesn't come up all that much. The handmaid or the hand servant, the manservant, the footman, the butler of the Count of Monte Cristo in the book is named Bertuccio. He's Italian. He's not a Spaniard who the Count saves from Luigi Vampa. That's not how it goes. Bertuccio was actually somebody who was trying to hide. He had a debt to pay, and he went into the Count's service knowing the Count would protect him, and the Count took him on knowing that Bertuccio would never betray him. Because if Bertuccio betrays the Count, then the Count simply gives him over to the people that he's running from. So Jacopo is mentioned. He is a servant of the Count's, but he isn't the main servant. Bertuccio is the main servant. And then there's other servants that are from Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. He's got hundreds of servants, but Bertuccio's the main guy, not Jacopo. Number 3, we are looking at the depth of the Count's revenge. In the movie, it kind of looks like it comes across in a year, maybe 2. But in the story of the Count of Monte Cristo, it takes a really long time for the Count to carry this out. He doesn't go to the Chateau d'If and then escape and then spend 3 months with Luigi Vampa. No, he goes to the Chateau d'If And he escapes, much like is in the film, but then you stop following Edmond Dantes, and instead you follow young Albert. It doesn't really go into how much time has passed. And in fact, the fact that Edmond Dantes is the Count of Monte Cristo is, like we've mentioned in comments, is a huge twist. This is the other book we're going to talk about twists in film adaptations. The fact that Dantes is the Count is an enormous twist. And the Count in the book has such a more convoluted plan. He takes on alternate personas, the two most notable of which are the Abbe Busoni, which is an Italian priest, and Lord Wilmore, who is an English noble. He assumes these roles. He creates these characters just as surely as he creates the character of the Count of Monte Cristo, so that he can build their reputations in their respective fields and in their respective countries, so that if anybody asks about the Counts, they'll say, oh, I heard from Abbe Busoni, who's a very well-respected priest. I've known him for 10 years, right? He told me the Count is this person, and he knows him. You should go talk to him. He builds not only the reputation of the Count, but in order to build the reputation of the Count, he builds the reputation of other characters that never existed before. Again, money's a good thing to have in this book, but it takes him years and years. His revenge is not something that he carries out in 3-4 years after he escapes from the Chateau d'If. It takes him a ton of time. He has to forge documents or be in an area long enough to get legal ones. He has to buy shipping companies. You form these histories with merchants and sailors so nobody suspects a thing. The depth that it goes to and the details that he puts in are insane. An honorable mention here is the whole in the movie where he's twirling his hair. That's one of the things, the only parts of that drove me nuts, is the Count was so fiercely in control of himself at all times. He never, the veil never slipped, ever. He eventually just admits it. Like, he doesn't do the little hair twirly thing and Mercedes recognizes him and things like that. He is absolutely 100% in control of himself at all times. He doesn't do anything absently. So really the only way to figure out who he is people either put the pieces together at great cost and expense to themselves, or he just flat out tells them right after he does them in, so to speak, and there's nothing that they can do about it. So number 4, this one, if you liked that the film was kind of a romantic, reconciling between Edmund and Mercedes, unfortunately that didn't happen in the book. In the book, unfortunately, Mercedes dies alone in a cottage. She doesn't actually die in the book, but she's left to live the life of a widow for the rest of her life as her son Albert goes off to war. He goes to fight the war in Africa that Britain was engaged in, or France rather was engaged in at the time. He basically joins the French Foreign Legion, and she's just left with herself in a small cottage that actually Dantes grew up in. He gives her that. I think honestly more to just remind her of her betrayal by marrying Fernand, 10 minutes after he's gone, which actually did happen. And it never really is touched upon as to whether Albert is the Count's son that I can remember. I don't think that's ever touched on. But the fact that they don't end up together. He actually disappears with a Greek princess named Haidee, who was his slave girl. Now, when I say slave girl in this context, I don't mean like sex slave or anything like that. Basically, and number 5 gets to how she ended up in this position, but she was the daughter of the ruler of Greece at the time when Greece was in a lot of conflict. Her father was betrayed and killed, and she and her mother were sold into slavery. The Count, she was sold into slavery actually to a character we're going to talk about in a second. Actually, she wasn't even sold. She was given to him for his betrayal of her father, and he then, on the way back from Greece, sold her into slavery for some pocket change and the ability to become a noble where he lived in his native France. And the Count found her in a slave market and purchased her because she thought she was beautiful, she was refined, she was a noblewoman, she was a princess, and he thought she didn't belong there. So he bought her and then gave her everything that she ever could want, desire, or need. The only caveat was she had to stay hidden in his estate. She couldn't get out and tell anybody anything, and nor did she want to. She was part of the Count's plan, and she knew it. Which brings us to number 5. The depth of the betrayal and the crimes of the Count de Morcerf, or as he is in the movie, Mondego. Count Mondego. Actually, in the movie, he's betrayed as a nobleman his whole life. He's the son of a count. Well, it's not actually true. In the book, he is like a fisherman when he's a kid. He goes off to fight a war in the Mediterranean, and he's very ambitious. While he's over there, he becomes the right-hand man to the king of Greece, or the ruler of Greece at the time. And the Egyptians, I believe, a Middle Eastern country that they were fighting with at the time, basically approached Morcerf and asked him to sell out his very close friend, who he was a strict confidant to, for enough money to become a count when he was back in France, and then he'd get his pick of the treasure from the taking of this man on top of that. It actually might have been the Ottomans, but the Turks. But anyway, the king considered Morcerf his best friend in the world. He sold him out cold, and then took his daughter as spoils, and then sold the man's daughter into slavery, on top of getting involved with Dantes being put away. In fact, he kind of helped Danglars and Dantes put him away to begin with. I mean, you know, to get Dantes put away, he helped with that, then went off to war, bought himself the title of count by owning a county, which you could do in that time. You just bought enough land that you became the ruler of that land, or the aristocrat in that land. So he did it for the money. And the Count, basically, it was lucky for him he came across young Haydée, and Haydée was more than happy to get back at the man that killed and betrayed her father and sold herself and her mother as slaves. But at the end, the Count, again, he doesn't end up with Mercedes. He sails off into the sunset with this gorgeous princess who a lot of times their relationship was almost father and daughter for a while. He deeply cared for her. She deeply cared for him. But as things unfolded, the age difference wasn't so much that it was like creepy, but they fell in love and they left the Count's life behind. There unfortunately wasn't that poetic moment where he buys the Chateau d'If and he reduces it to rubble. That unfortunately wasn't there. Instead, he sails off into the sunset, having his revenge accomplished. Albert, whose father's name and therefore his own name has been so sullied, he goes off to fight war so that he, as a legitimately good kid, can make a renewed name for himself. Whereas his father was just a traitor and a jerk and a horrible person, betrayed every friend he ever had. So that is the 5 things that the Count of Monte Cristo has in its print form that you won't find in the movie form. Now, as always, again, these are just 5 things that I found. There's probably more that you know of. I know there are. So if you can think of some things that I didn't come up with, or some different information that wasn't mentioned in this video, leave a comment below. As always, if you like content like this, you want to see new videos, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you get new videos when they come out. Stick around. We're going to do more of these 5 things you like. Obviously, thumbs up, likes, they're super important because it helps me know what you guys want to see. So, until next time, this is Jake with Code Duck signing off.